Straight to a leadership summit that's currently underway in Sandton.
Yeah, the summit provides a platform for some of the world's most brilliant thinkers to share their leadership strategies and insights on issues relating to business, economics, government and science.
Let's take you live there to Sandton now.
That is the most trying and difficult of all this. This is not a task merely for presidents, prime ministers, former presidents or former prime ministers, as you've heard, but for all those in positions of responsibility who have a chance and the means to contribute to a better world. And in our own country, we would say, who have a chance to contribute to a better South Africa. I'm certain that through this summit, with the lessons that will be learned, many who have the chance to make a difference will also find the means. Now, as a country, South Africa is in great need of leadership from people who have the commitment, but also from people who have the vision, the capabilities and determination to confront the many challenges that we confront at this point in time. History has bequeathed to this generation a devastating legacy which emanates from our past, a legacy of poverty, inequality, and underdevelopment. Even 24 years after the advent of our own democracy, it continues to deny millions of our people the skills, this legacy that is, the assets and the opportunities to participate in a meaningful way in the economy. We must acknowledge that over the course of the last decade, the progress we have made in addressing this legacy that we inherited has been set back by a number of issues: a lackluster economy, declining investment, policy incoherence and policy uncertainty, as well as inconsistency, and the effects of corruption and the effects of state capture, as many of us know. And this has happened on a dramatic scale, as we all South Africans know. As a measure of the malaise since the end of 2008's global financial crisis, our country's economic growth has not risen above 2% a year, year on year. At such levels, economic growth cannot keep up with population growth, and the number of jobs created can also not keep up with the number of people who are every year entering the job market. While we have made great strides in bringing millions of our people out of poverty, we are faced with an unemployment crisis. And so that it just is clear, many million South Africans have been brought out of poverty. And many of us will know that many people have now been brought into the middle class. But despite all this progress, we still face huge challenges. And unless we are able to revive our economy and create jobs, the majority of South Africans will be denied real, meaningful opportunities to create a better life for themselves and for their families. We therefore need to grow our economy at a far greater pace. Now, this calls for leadership, but it also calls for leadership at a multilateral level. It is not only the one person who will provide that leadership, it is all of us working in the various spaces where we are, providing the necessary leadership to move our country forward. And may I say that In the 90s, as we were moving towards democracy, in the 80s, moving towards the 90s, many, many people came forward and provided ideas, provided leadership. And I remember in the business community, many people said the violence that was engulfing our country needed to be brought to an end. And so many business leaders provided leadership. They provided a clear vision of the type of South Africa that they wanted to see. So therefore, leadership is not the preserve of the chosen few only, as I was saying. It is something that can be exercised by all of us. In order to do so, we need to provide that leadership so that we can return to the levels of growth we were able to achieve before the global economic crisis. But we also need to surpass that level as well. As we undertake the work required to do so, we must remain mindful that growth in the end is not an end in itself. Growth must be seen as a means to an end. And that end is about broadening prosperity and making sure that as many South Africans as possible do lead prosperous lives. Growth is vital to our efforts to reduce poverty and to create employment, and to improve health outcomes, to make society safer, and to better the lives of all people on all levels. Growth is necessary, but not sufficient condition for the achievement of a more equal and cohesive society. It is therefore essential, ladies and gentlemen, if we are to achieve a South Africa that is free, a South Africa that is equal and prosperous, that we strive for growth that is inclusive and sustainable. This means, in the first instance, that growth must address the exclusion of those of our compatriots who were relegated to the back of the economy. And mostly those are black people and the women of our country across all color lines. It must create employment on a more massive scale, bringing into the mainstream of the economy millions and millions of young people and women. As we direct investment to these parts of the economy with the greatest potential for employment creation, we have to confront the changing nature of work. We have to create jobs for the unemployed of today while preparing the workforce for the jobs of tomorrow. The World Bank has been looking at the nature of work and trying to postulate what the nature of work will be in the future. I was asked to lead an International Labour Organization committee that is also looking at the future of work. So a number of people are beginning to say, let us look at how work is going to be done, performed, but in South Africa, we still have to deal with the challenge of the current unemployment. Now, the rapid technological advances of the Fourth Industrial Revolution are fundamentally changing the nature, the profile, as well as the location of work. We need to be ready not only to adjust to this reality, but to play an active role in shaping the new world of work. And this we are going to be compelled to do, whether we like it or not, because the technological advances that are being brought to bear and being brought about by the Fourth Industrial Revolution are here, and they are not going to wait for us to wake up. They are actually making us awake right now. We will soon be establishing a Digital Industrial Revolution Commission, which will develop a comprehensive national plan to enable South Africa to take effective advantage of the fourth industrial revolution. One of its central considerations must be the availability of suitable skills, particularly amongst young people. The country's severe skills deficit is a central factor, particularly in the exclusion of young people, mostly black young people, and women in general. We have achieved nearly universal primary school attendance and have almost 1 million students in institutions of higher learning, like colleges and universities and so on. But we are still not achieving the quality outcomes that we need. We must pay particular attention to making our education system much more responsive to the needs and the demands of our economy. This must of necessity be an effort that we embark upon collectively and together. Now, since I was elected president, one of the things I've been really pushing for is that the problems of our country cannot be solved by one sector of our society alone. And I've been agitating for the creation of a social compact that will get all of us working together, collectively and in unison. Now, we have seen how this has benefited a number of other economies. The Irish economy was in the doldrums some years ago, and they built a social compact. The Dutch did the same thing, and through that, they were able to propel their country forward. And we've been experimenting with a number of initiatives to see how best we can get all various sectors, labor, business, communities, and government working together. And recently we held a job summit which came up with a number of interventions. So the private sector has a huge role to play in offering a number or putting forward a number of initiatives, particularly in skills development. And I know that the private sector invests a lot of money in education. But we're also saying that let us be more focused. Let us create as many jobs as we possibly can and give hope to the young people who are out there who do not have jobs, but also give them on-the-job training. Having just come back from Germany, looking at the German education system, which is a dual system which mixes theoretical as well as practical type of education. And I found that that would be a great fit for us here in South Africa, in that we're still struggling with a past education system which was based on exclusion and apartheid. Companies also need to work closely with various education centers in our country, your colleges and technicons, to ensure the relevance of the curricula and the suitability of the skills that are taught, and to smooth the path from education to employment. And this is where the dual education system, for me, has great attraction. And this we can do if business and government, indeed labor and others, work together to craft those education modules and curricula that will take this country forward. If there is anything that we need to focus our attention on and work together to try and achieve, it is around skills development, improving our education outcomes. Because it is in this area where apartheid had the greatest effect. And it is in this area where we need to focus much more attention. Another reason for economic exclusion that many people are suffering from is the lack of access to land and other assets. Without assets, most South Africans are unable to accumulate wealth, are unable to break the intergenerational cycle of poverty, and are also unable to finance whatever entrepreneurial venture that they may conceive of. And the reality in our country, which we need to deal with as a nation collectively and working together, is that having gone through all these years of exclusion, many South Africans have been going through grinding intergenerational poverty, where poverty is bequeathed from one generation to the next because there is no asset base and there is no skill base. Now, this is where we come in, where we need to show leadership, where we need to show that as we work together, we will be able to address some of these challenges. The current focus, yes, on an asset class, which is land, is therefore a vital opportunity to address the economic exclusion. Land has always, particularly in African circles, has always been seen as the base, the rudimentary asset that one needs to have to be able to accede to a more prosperous life. And with that removed, it becomes more difficult for people to then begin to move towards a better life and a prosperous life. So it is for this reason that there's been a great push and agitation to address the land question. So land reform is not only about correcting a grave historical injustice, it is also an absolute economic necessity. Through fair, transparent, and comprehensive land reform, we seek to unlock the full economic potential of our country and its people. Those who have lived on the land for generations will have the right and the means to work it. Emerging farmers will have the land, security, and support they need to establish value businesses. Poor people in urban areas should also be able to have affordable housing in areas that are located near the economic opportunities and social amenities. Accelerated land reform undertaken within the framework of our Constitution, but more importantly, in adherence to the laws of our country, in other words, adhering to the rule of law, can be an effective catalyst for greater agricultural production, rural development, employment creation, and broader economic growth. A central element of our effort to promote inclusive growth is that this area needs to be addressed, but as I've said repeatedly, we will not allow this to lead to the degradation of our economy. We will not allow land grabs. We will make sure that as we resolve this historic problem and heal this wound, we will do it in the only way that Nelson Mandela taught us, to be able to have thoroughgoing discussions and reach agreement that is going to contribute to nation building and social cohesion. Because and this we do because we subscribe to the notion that South Africa belongs to all who live in it. This was inscribed in the Freedom Charter by our forebears, and it still remains the lodestar document that continues to guide what we do. And if we finally say South Africa belongs to all who live in it, then it enables us to use the Madiba magic type of experience, the way of doing things, and reach agreement which will be all-inclusive, which will get all South Africans to move in the same direction and see that the benefit will be for all of us rather than an elite, rather than a particular interest group. And this is the South Africa that we are seeking to build, a South Africa which Madiba subscribed to when he said, yes, we need to remove all vestiges of injustice, that there should be justice in our country, but as we do so, we should move together and make sure that there is reconciliation. So in the end, I want to reconcile, yes, the hunger for land that our people have, but also reconcile the fears and the concerns that those who have land, so that we mix the two and find a durable and a sustainable solution going forward. Now, another central element of our effort to promote inclusive growth is an ambitious investment drive that we have embarked upon to raise $100 billion in new investment over the next 5 years. This approach is informed by the understanding that only a massive increase in investment in the productive sectors of our economy will create the growth that we need to make a meaningful impact on unemployment. It is less than a week since we hosted more than 1,100 investors in this very same conference center for the inaugural South African Investment Conference. The conference showcased a portfolio of bankable investment projects across the economy for investors' consideration. We announced a range of reforms to improve the ease of doing business in South Africa and engaged with stakeholders on the issues that they find hamper further investment. And during the course of the conference, several companies announced investments with a total value of 290 billion rand to be invested in our country. This was a phenomenal achievement. Now, importantly, almost all these investments will make a direct contribution to the growth that is inclusive. It was wonderful watching most of these companies almost getting involved in a competitive scramble just to get to the microphone and say, we are going to invest so much and so much. And this was not what I cajoled or forced them to do. It was out of their own volition. And with that, I was then able to say, because there had been accusations that there was an investment strike, I said, with 290 billion rand of investments coming and more coming, clearly the investment strike is over. We now are getting South Africa back to work, and that's precisely what we're going to do. Now, what is this going to do? It's going to assist in diversifying our economy, with investments being announced in sectors like mining, forestry, manufacturing, telecommunications, transport, energy, agro-processing, consumer goods, pharmaceuticals, infrastructure, financial services, energy, ICT, and water. Even McDonald's stood up to say something. After I had left, they said they will be investing up to 3 billion rand. So I said, oh, you waited for me to leave to be president to make this type of announcement. Now, these are investments that will create employment in many parts of the country, requiring many different types of expertise and promising to create new capacity in several emerging industries and sub-industries. As we undertake these efforts to achieve sustainable growth, we have been forced by weakened economic conditions, but more specifically, 2 quarters of negative growth, to announce an economic stimulus and recovery plan to ignite economic growth and to restore confidence in our economy. Now, working with within the existing fiscal framework, we have pre-prioritized public spending to boost economic growth and employment in a number of sectors. In identifying these priority areas, there was a deliberate effort to ensure that growth would be inclusive and sustainable. The beneficiaries of these interventions are going to be predominantly young people, your emerging businesses, women, specifically people living in the townships and the rural areas. Interventions will include a package of support measures for commercial farmers, black commercial farmers, to enable them to increase their entry into food value chains. Public funding will also be redirected towards igniting economic activity in townships as well as rural areas through the revitalization of industrial parks in a number of townships. Now, resources are being redirected towards addressing immediate challenges also. In health, our health sector has been facing enormous challenges. We are redirecting funding to that, education and hospital supplies, but the stimulus itself includes also the establishment of an infrastructure fund, which we are busy putting together and which will consolidate government's 400 billion rand of infrastructure spend, and we hope to leverage resources from the private sector, financial institutions, and other developmental agencies. Among the projects that the fund will support are the provision of roads, human settlements, schools, student accommodation, and public transport. Further infrastructure spending is being directed to 57 priority municipalities to cover, amongst other things, such as sewage, water purification, electricity, and so forth. While these projects will boost productive activity in our economy and provide necessary economic infrastructure, the primary beneficiaries will be the poor and the marginalized in our economy. This is another element of the stimulus package that promotes growth and inclusive as well as sustainable growth. Now, none of these efforts to promote growth will succeed without leadership. It is at precisely this moment, as we find ourselves at an economic crossroads, that we require courageous, committed, determined, as well as visionary leadership throughout society, in business, labor, communities, and all over. Each social partner needs to play its role. While it is the private sector that will drive the bulk of fixed investment in the economy, it is government that has to create a conducive and an enabling environment. That is why we are working very hard to reduce the cost of doing business. We are also working very hard to improve the regulatory efficiency in our economy, but we are also introducing measures to reduce economic concentration and ownership, but we also pushing ahead with addressing issues such as corruption in our country, that those who have been involved in corrupt activities must be dealt with without any fail and without any doubt, because corruption is bad. Because it is government's responsibility to make sure that we reduce corruption, we address it as pointedly as we possibly can, to prevent also rent-seeking. But corruption is not only in the public sector, it is also in the private sector. We have seen how some in the private sector, be they big companies, be they consultancy firms, have also been involved in corrupt activities. The dream that we have of South Africa is that we must cleanse our country of all corrupt activities. We must create a South Africa that our people will have trust in, its leaders will have confidence in its leaders. And it is usually leaders who are the ones who are at the forefront of perpetrating all these corrupt activities. It is for that reason that we say leadership is important. Leadership is needed. Leadership that is visionary, but leadership that is not self-seeking. Leadership that is not going to seek to look after itself. We are therefore taking all these steps to restore good governance at state-owned enterprises and strengthen critical public institutions. Government needs to take responsibility for managing public funds and to do so responsibly and prudently. In a severely constrained fiscal environment, we are continuing to invest in growth-enhancing measures and ensuring that education, health, social support receive priority. It is at times like these that we look to business to be our partners in providing leadership. And your company here has been able to demonstrate that, yes, it can live up to the needs that South Africa has in as far as providing leadership. I'm particularly pleased that we have found a way and leaders like Adrian Gore, who's been working with us to set up a fund for small and medium enterprises and to address some of the challenges that our country faces. We are very fortunate to have reached a level now where we can work together. It's not like in the past 9 years where business tended to be looked at as the enemy. It's not like in the past few years where there wasn't good cooperation between government, business, and labor and communities. We are now engendering a new way of working, of getting our people to work together. So we are truly fortunate, and may the vision, the talent that leaders like Adrian Gore have continue to be played out in South Africa. And Adrian, I've never said thank you to you, but thank you very much for showing leadership in this area. Now, we are also particularly pleased because this is being done to demonstrate that, yes, South African companies can show good corporate citizenship as they seek to generate decent returns for their shareholders. Companies share a common responsibility to ensure that their operations and business practices advance the best interests of all our citizens, because there are good ways of making money. You can still make a big bundle of money by being a really good corporate citizen. And I have seen how those companies that have embraced this ethos have been able to succeed. This has become even more important as we seek to restore investor confidence in our economy and in our institutions of governance. Now more than ever, we need capable and decisive leadership at the helm. At the helm of, yes, government, organizations, but also at the helm of whatever department that you may be deployed in, because that is where you exercise leadership. That is where you demonstrate that, yes, you are prepared to play your part to move South Africa along. Now more than ever, we need companies with an ethical organizational culture that abhors corruption, collusion, and other unethical practices. Now more than ever, we need companies committed to sustainability who do not prize short-term profit over the economic legacy of future generations. What we need are companies who understand where we have come from as a country, who understand the broken country that we have emerged from, but who also have a keen understanding of the vision that we have and where we are seeking to go, but who are also committed to be part of a better future for all South Africans. As we grapple with the challenges of the present, we are fortunate to have in the National Development Plan a broad consensus on the future that we want to build. The National Development Plan details the South Africa of the future that we want. It has as its central purpose the need to unite our nation, to also unleash the energies of our citizens, to grow an inclusive economy, build the capabilities of South Africans, and enhance the capability of the state and leaders working together to solve complex problems. The task before us is quite a significant task. It is not an easy task, but if it was easy, anybody would do it. Now, history has put us where we are, all of us collectively, to make a contribution to move this country forward. We have emerged from a period of turbulence and are now embarking on a new path of growth and renewal, a new dawn, as it were. The success of our efforts rests on sound and decisive leadership. We are energized, we are determined, and we have the means, all of us, to succeed. Allow me to conclude with a few words from the vision statement of the National Development Plan. If you haven't read it, take time to read it because it's beautiful prose, but it's the type of prose that energizes us to look forward to this desired destination that we want to go to. And it says, we are a people at work. We work to create plenty. Our work brings us ever closer to our dreams. Work grounds our dreams, even the more fantastic they are. The reality of work connects us to our dreams. We work towards goals with patience, invested in actual effort. We invest in our efforts and are not waiting in disengaged expectation. Because we are impatient to succeed, we work with painstaking rigor. Our efforts, not so much those of others, make us stronger. Then we are patient for the results of our efforts. This kind of patience gives birth to our new work ethic. In this new work ethic, we ground our dreams. We have built our own houses. We are confident and self-sufficient because we are traders. We are inventors. We are workers. We create companies. We set up stalls. We are studious. We are gardeners. We feel a call to serve. It is, that's the end of the quote, it is in meeting that call to serve that we provide leadership. Because leaders must be people who are prepared to serve. Leaders must be people who are not prepared to serve their own self-interest and advance their own interests, their families, and their friends' interests. Leaders are those who are prepared to serve the people of South Africa. And that is what we should do. I thank you.
Thank you. One question.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Can I ask one question?